In 1967, 5 years after the release of Dr. No, the fifth official James Bond film was released. The only year since 1962 not to have a Bond film release was 1966. The 1960s were truly the height of Bond mania. However, Sean Connery was becoming increasingly unhappy with his role as James Bond. This was down to pay disputes, but also a lack of privacy, which were becoming a bigger and bigger issue. So during the filming of Only Twice, Sean Connery announced his exit from the series. There was still very much an appetite for James Bond, but with no actor to fill the role. Well, that's where George Lazenby comes in. How exactly George Lazenby got the role varies from account to account, but it was still a very unorthodox and left-field casting choice. George Lazenby was known at the time of his casting as the face of the Fry's chocolate bar adverts. His acting career was very limited, and most of his professional work at this stage had consisted of modelling. Lazenby, having met Albert Broccoli in a barbershop, was soon offered a screen test. Lazenby soon got the role, and work quickly began on the sixth James Bond film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Peter Hunt, who had edited the previous 5 Bond movies, was picked to be the film's director. This, in my opinion, heavily contributes to why On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a very well shot film, arguably Bond at its most cinematic. Michael Reed was the director of photography for the film and evidently did a fantastic job and realising the vision of the script. The script was written by Richard Marbain, who had previously penned all of the previous outings except for You Only Live Twice. He was not the sole writer on the other Bond outings he worked on, but he was for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It was decided to strip things back a little in this film in terms of the gadgetry. Marbain also stuck quite closely to the original Fleming novel to the point where continuity errors are created, but we'll get to that. On Her Majesty's Secret Service marks a huge shift in the style and overall aesthetic of the series. Beyond M, Moneypenny and Q remain the same, practically everything else changed. There's a new Bond, a new Blofeld, and a new visual style thanks to Peter Hunt and Michael Reed. It's interesting looking at this film, particularly if you watch the series in chronological order. Along with a new Bond, there was also a new Blofeld. Telly Savalas was cast as Blofeld, as the producers supposedly wanted a more physically dominant actor who could convincingly face off against Lazenby in a fight. It's a shame that Donald Pleasence didn't return, but Savalas was well suited to the role. Most of the principal recurring cast remain the same, but not Bond and Blofeld. It would appear when a new Bond is cast, Blofeld must also be recast, which I like, although Connery against Savalas would have been pretty great. George Lazenby's performance is a tad wooden throughout the film, though he does gradually improve and his acting in the final scene is pretty good. Lazenby was certainly miscast, but in some scenes he's quite a decent 007. He's particularly good during the action sequences. Tonally speaking, this film does take things much more seriously. I wouldn't quite call it gritty or anything like that, but it certainly seems much more grounded than previous outings, in particular You Only Live Twice. The campy theatrics that were so commonplace in the next film, Diamonds Are Forever, are nowhere to be seen here. This film is also quite a bit longer. It's 25 minutes longer than You Only Live Twice. However, the longer running time is justified. The pacing is much more gradual, and I suppose this could make On Her Majesty's Secret Service a much more mature film than what audiences had come to expect at this point. There isn't a ton of action. Majesties is a movie that takes its time with building up the plot. The action is pretty good when it arrives, but I don't think of the incredible action sequences when I remember this movie. When I remember this movie, I think of the plot. The hero-villain dynamic is very well realised here. Blofeld and Bond are well written, and the scenes between the two characters are interesting to watch. There is obviously the matter of a whopping continuity error. Blofeld and Bond meet again in this movie for the first time, ignoring the events of the previous film. This is because the producers were keen to follow the original novel closely, and the film order is very different to the book order, even at this relatively early stage of the franchise. It's a mistake and makes even less sense when you wonder why Bond is so keen to take out Blofeld near the start of the film, perhaps because they met before. But it's an error, and that's just that. The events of the previous film are indeed acknowledged, such as when Bond goes through his possessions after he resigns/takes leave from MI6. Diana Rigg as Countess Tracy DiVincenzo is the standout performer in the film. Tracy is probably one of the best written Bond girls who at this stage have been fairly non-existent characters. Tracy is a complex and sympathetically written character, and Diana Rigg is fantastic in the role. Rigg has fairly good chemistry with Lazenby. In fact, the scenes with Bond and Tracy are some of the absolute best of the movie. Lazenby decided, with the advice of his agent, not to appear in any more Bond movies and to decline the offer of a multi-film contract. Reportedly, Lazenby's agent didn't think the spy genre would last into the 1970s and that the genre would soon lose its popularity. There were also tensions on set, Lazenby's lack of acting experience causing some degree of nervousness amongst fellow members of the cast and the producers. Lazenby made an effort to distance himself from the role in later years. He grew a beard and started appearing in smaller films that were far away from the world of 007. In recent times, however, he has warmed to the series and in 2017 appeared in a docudrama all about his experience as James Bond. It was titled Becoming Bond. The Lazenby era, if you can even call it an era due to it being so brief, is interesting. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is without question one of the most cinematic Bond outings. There are so many utterly wonderful shots in the film, frankly too many to count. Peter Hunt and Michael Reed both did a fantastic job in their respective roles. The cast for the most part were pretty great. Telly Savalas is hugely underrated as Blofeld, which is a shame. Savalas brings so much to the character, the added physicality helps. I cannot really picture Donald Pleasance as Blofeld in a fight with Bond. The supporting MI6 regulars are just as great as they always are. Bernard Lee is of particular brilliance here, arguably his best performance as M. George Lazenby was miscast, but his performance does get better, and maybe with a few more Bond films under his belt, he had been great, but who knows. The musical score is the best for a Bond film at this stage in the series. We Have All the Time in the World by Louis Armstrong is a fantastic song which adds so much depth and emotion to the very core of the story. And of course, who could forget the final scene of the film? It's perfect. The quickness of Tracy's death is tragic, and how it's presented on screen is masterful. Lazenby carries the scene and delivers some genuinely emotional dialogue. On Her Majesty's Secret Service has its flaws, but represents the Bond franchise at arguably its very best, giving audiences a compelling story, a sublime musical score, and an ending that people are still talking about over 50 years later.